having a Catholic education could be a terrible liability for a girl.
Unbelievable. Anyone who says there's no anti-Catholic feeling out there, did you hear that comment? It was very brief, I know. We clipped it from a longer interview, but having a Catholic education could be terrible. The HPV vaccine, now, it's supposed to protect girls from cervical cancer, but many argue that it encourages promiscuity, eliminates parental responsibility, enables maybe a decadent culture, and there could be side effects too, actual physical side effects. In Calgary, a group has been formed specifically to oppose the Catholic Archdiocese because the Archdiocese opposes the use of vaccine, or at least the enforced use of it, in Catholic schools. Bishop Fred Henry of Calgary joins us. Welcome to you, sir.
Thank you, Michael.
Now, so what is the actual position of the Archdiocese?
Well, fundamentally, what we're saying is, look, as a Catholic institution, we do not think that we're in a position to be able to simply sign on mindlessly to this particular solution to a very difficult problem. From our vantage point, unfortunately, it looks like our so-called local bioethicists are functioning coming out of a medical perspective, but basically they're demeaning themselves, it seems to me, by simply specifying their role as body mechanics. Yeah. They're not doctors of the soul. They're not looking at the total picture. They're not asking what sexuality is all about. They're looking at consequences of a sexually transmitted disease, and they're saying, okay, how do we deal with the consequences, and refusing to go back and look at what are the causes that bring on this disease, and in a small number of cases, cervical cancer. And until we change behavior, we are simply going to be kind of putting a Band-Aid on our vices, and things are not going to radically change. So we have simply taken what the Journal of Obstetricians and Gynecologists have said is their first recommendation dealing with this particular problem. The first recommendation is education and abstinence. And then they go on and they talk about other things. Well, we're taking that very seriously. That's part of our teaching about human sexuality. And we think that the greatest service we can give our young people is to teach them the whole context of the beauty of God's gift of sexuality and what responsible sexual activity is.
Right.
And we're finding that this response, this knee-jerk response to the HPV virus is vaccination, and in some cases condom, but that's a secondary kind of approach, and it's ultimately not going to prove to be successful.
So the group that's been formed, and I will be quite specific here, these groups that are formed, people assume it's lots of parents and lots of teachers or lots of doctors. It tends to be a small group of people who already have a fairly set agenda. They want all Catholic schools in Calgary to either offer this vaccine or to make sure that kids have the vaccine unless the parents aggressively opt out of it?
Yes, that's right. Their preference is, of course, is that this vaccine be given within the context of Catholic schools. Yeah. Basically because it's easy, the numbers increase when you do that, and I think you end up bullying parents by saying, trust us, we know better than you do, and we think that your kids ought to receive this. And we're trying to educate parents and their responsibility to make informed decisions within the context of their faith.
Now, this is not, people will have to realize this, it's not about saying no to a vaccination for all sorts of diseases that can be contracted. This is based on behavior. I understand a girl could be completely responsible in her sexuality but still meet a guy who has not been. But that again assumes that guys are going to act in a most appalling way. It's looking at the lowest common denominator, really.
Well, what we have to do is we've got to change our whole approach to sexuality, just as we have done with respect to smoking. Sexual activity outside the context of marriage should not be endorsed. It should not be supported. It should be challenged. And the only way we can do that is through educating and praying for God's grace to remain chaste and to learn something about virtue. And this applies both to men and to women. And I think it's going to be, the next kind of move is probably going to be to say, well, okay, now it's time we got to vaccinate all the males too in order for this to be effective. And meanwhile, Merck, the producer of Gardasil, is smiling and laughing all the way to the bank as they count their millions and millions of dollars from an unneeded vaccine that is not the primary way of dealing with this disease. Behavioral change is. And unfortunately, people don't want to hear that message because we are so into pleasure that we are not really respecting God's gift of sexuality.
I'm glad you made that point about big pharmaceuticals, because we hear on the left, quite rightly often, challenging the pharmaceutical industry. Well, they're making huge amounts of money out of this. And I agree with you, it's inevitable. Boys, there'll be another vaccine for boys that will also make us safer. But I think what it comes down to, and it's not just this issue, it's people saying that Catholic schools and Catholic churches are only acceptable when they're not very Catholic.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the other aspects to it, Michael, is that this is like Obama North. Just as Obama is starting to challenge religious freedom in the United States and the healthcare area for us, one of the focal points is education and healthcare, where they merge together. And we're trying to see now movements which are saying, well, forget your faith. Forget your Catholic principles and just do this. Look at the consequences. It saves lives. This is the best risk management procedure. This is utilitarianism at its ultimate, and it has nothing to do with objective right, wrong norms or with the Christian understanding of sexuality. Mm-hmm. That's pure and simple. This is a secularist move, and those who sometimes parade under the umbrella of supposedly being bioethicists and Catholics are not Catholic bioethicists, and they are not operating out of a mandate and have no right to teach and promote a so-called Catholic dissident stance.
Well said, well said. I'm so grateful you are there. As always, a great pleasure. Thank you so very much indeed.
You're welcome, Michael. God bless you.